fall camp scrimmage intel as fall camp finished through the line. Let's break it down just a little bit. Let's go out to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, because they're in a situation here where they have a roster in Tuscaloosa that they feel really good about. The one thing that you are probably questioning a little bit or waiting to see some results on is who's going to start at quarterback for you. Well, at the scrimmage, we had some people that are plugged in with Bama Online that were there, and the intel is that overall the quarterbacks as a group had a pretty good day. Jalen Milroe is the individual who took the first snaps with the ones. Now, it doesn't mean Jalen Milroe is a starting quarterback. Doesn't mean he's going to be your guy for all 12 games. It just means for this scrimmage, he took the first snaps with the ones. It said he looked really good, as well as Ty Simpson. There were reports from different individuals saying Ty Simpson had the best day. Some people said Jalen Milroe had the best day. Across the board, though, it was not a large gap between whoever you picked as your leader that day. Now, Tyler Buckner is a transfer quarterback from Notre Dame, followed his offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, to Tuscaloosa. And there were a lot of people, myself included, who have kind of dismissed Tyler Buckner from this quarterback derby. There are people that watched the scrimmage this past weekend and said, hey, now, is he going to win the job? I don't know, but I think it's too early to say he's just not going to be a factor in this thing. So take of that as you will. He led a 95-yard touchdown drive. Kendrick Law is a wide receiver for them that had an 80-yard touchdown catch. Malik Benson is a JUCO transfer that also had a good day. Before I move on to this wide receiver room, I want to mention Dylan Lonergan. Is he going to start for Alabama this coming season? No. Some highly recruited true freshman. So I don't think you're throwing him to the dogs game one and saying, hey, you're our guy, let's roll going forward. But to hear the reports you've heard about Dylan Lonergan, throwing 80-yard bombs to Kendrick Law, having a good day at the office, looking serviceable and looking solid in a scrimmage as a true freshman, says a lot about the future of Alabama. Says a lot about where things are headed under Nick Saban. There's a lot made about what Alabama is going to be going forward and about Nick Saban and where he is. And I'm just going to say this, Alabama, as long as Nick Saban's there, the way he recruits, they're not going anywhere. And Dylan Lonergan exemplifies that to a T. Back to what I was saying about the wide receivers, though, they still got a lot of dudes in that room that can play. Law and Benson were singled out, like I mentioned a second ago. Feels like the drops are still kind of an issue right now when it comes to what Alabama is doing in that receiver room. They don't hate where they're at. As a whole, I had to turn my brightness down there a little bit. It's getting distracted. As a whole, they don't hate where they're at. They have a lot of speed in that room. They feel like they need to polish up where they're at fundamentally to capitalize on all the speed they have in that wide receiver room. Because we said it before, it's going to be ground and pound. It is going to be move the line of scrimmage. So when that happens, you better have some dudes that can look it in and go ahead and score for you when you get those deep shots available to you. And also the quarterback has to hit them in stride. So kind of a mechanism that is continuing to progress, but you saw some good things during the scrimmage. Still want to clean up those drops. Now the offensive line is going to be, and I said it many times, that's going to be the engine for Alabama this coming season. That is going to be what moves the team going forward. That's going to be the offensive approach. Be big, be nasty, be physical on the O-line, and get after it. Caden Proctor is a name that has come up a lot during this fall camp session for Alabama. I mean, he's a he was committed to Iowa and then was flipped from Iowa to Alabama close to signing day. He's going to start for them on the offensive line. A true freshman. You know how good you have to be, how physically developed you have to be to start for any SEC team on the offensive line, let alone Nick Saban and Alabama and what they're bringing to the table this coming season. So they feel really good about the offensive line. There's a certain buzz about them. Like we talked to Tim Watts from Bama Online the other day on the On3 Roundtable YouTube channel, and he told us like they got a little bit of nastiness to them. Does this O-line. Like they're playing through the whistle. You got to kind of blow the whistle a few times to get them to lay off whoever they're blocking. Like I need that from my offensive line. I need us to have the edge. You are the character, the personality, all that for your offense. So to hear that's kind of the direction they're leaning right now, they got that edge to them. That excites me for what they're going to do running the football because make no mistake, they will run the football this coming season to Alabama. That will be the approach. Now defensively, the secondary is what's getting a lot of attention. And I think it's very much so well-deserved. Caleb Downs is a 5-star true freshman. He's getting a lot of burn with the ones at safety. Kid who we talked about, really, as soon as he signed with Alabama, we're like, I don't know how you keep this kid off the field so far along in terms of his acumen for the game. He was an early enrollee at Alabama, so he just started devouring the playbook, was probably just sleeping in the film room with how much he was watching. A guy that's committed to the game, and it sounds like that has paid dividends so far with him getting burned with the ones as a true freshman. Jalen Key is a transfer safety from UAB. A lot of people wanted his services, Florida State being one of those schools. Alabama ultimately ended up winning out for him. Those two are getting a lot of run. Malachi Moore is a defensive back who's moved all around the secondary for Alabama right now. He's played safety. He's played star. The bottom line with him is they're going to find a way to have him on the field. Now, what he looks like on the depth chart, on a roster, don't worry about that. He's a starter for them. In some way, shape, or form, he will start for them going forward. So, as a whole for Alabama, I think they're fine with everybody talking about Georgia, talking about LSU. Bama's fine just kind of flying under the radar. Feels like the wrong term to use because it's Alabama. You're never really going to be under the radar. But they're fine not being picked to win the SEC. They're just going to kind of stay wherever they're at. And when it comes time to play games, they'll make sure that you feel them. So fall camp, they treat it like Fort Knox, but that's kind of the intel out of Tuscaloosa. Now, week 2, they welcome the Texas Longhorns to town. Let's break down what's going on at Texas. They had really their final scrimmage this past weekend. They have a mock game coming up this next weekend, but at that point, you're not really evaluating so much as you are just kind of trying to prep for game week. If that makes sense, trying to understand, okay, this is what happens when we get a penalty, and this is our operation when we take the field. This is what happens if the ones go down, a lot of operational things. So in this final scrimmage, though, Steve Sarkisian felt like Texas, the defensive side of the ball, had the best day. They weren't unhappy with the offense. They felt like they did some good things. They need more consistency out of them. And if I'm a Texas Longhorn fan, hearing that the defense won the day, looking at all the weapons they have offensively, looking at Quentin Ewers on that side of the ball, I'm like, okay, I don't love hearing that because whenever you play yourself, there's always that feeling of, well, if the defense has a great day, the offense had a bad day, or vice versa. I think that's a win if I'm a Texas fan because as talented as that Texas offense is going to be, I don't have questions about can they get it done. I need to know if the defense can hold up their end of the bargain. T'Vondre Sweat was a guy that Steve Sarkisian singled out after practice. Ethan Burke talked about him being a blue-collar guy, rolls up his sleeve, just gets after is what Steve Sarkisian said. To be able to have that kind of presence in the trenches, that needs to be a character trait of Texas to go and accomplish what they want to accomplish. If you want to win the Big 12, you want to make the college football playoff, you want to be able to get after it in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and get a win against the Crimson Tide, you have to have it up front. And so to hear the return on investment so far during fall camp is positive, especially from that last scrimmage. You got to be encouraged about that. Now, it wasn't all bad on the offensive side of the ball. Again, Steve Sarkisian said they need more consistency, but Xavier Worthy, based on how he ended last year, comes out after the fact he had a broken hand. To hear that he was having an explosive day at this final scrimmage, you never wondered about Xavier Worthy. You don't have any questions about this wide receiver room, but it's got to feel good to hear the rev in the engine a little bit offensively. Got to feel good to hear that Xavier Worthy is looking more and more like himself as opposed to maybe what we saw at the end of the year when he wasn't totally healthy. So as a whole, man, for Texas, they feel really good about their depth. He mentioned Jelani McDonald, who is a true freshman linebacker, also played some quarterback in high school. I covered some of his games when he was at Waco Connolly. Dude is a special athlete. They like the way that he's come along so far. The depth at Texas, going back to that, this is one of the deepest teams they feel like they've had in a minute here. And depth is the key in college football. If you watch the show, you're a college football junkie, you understand that. Depth, and more depth. How does Georgia go and roll 2 national titles in a row? Because the ones and the twos, they pretty much look the same. And that was what Steve Sarkisian was saying about his team after the scrimmage. He said, yeah, we're going to set a depth. We got to let these guys know so they have an understanding when it comes to this mock game. But even so, when we go from ones to twos and twos versus ones, we don't see a total difference. And some of that is, you're kind of taking Steve Sarkisian's word for it because we're not in those actual scrimmages. But I don't think Steve Sarkisian would just say that. That's a pretty specific statement to make. So if you're a Texas fan, you're encouraged about the way this depth has rolled along so far, and you're excited to see it finally take the field here. Just a few short days. Let's go out to Gainesville, Florida. We're going to talk about the Swamp Kings documentary here in just a little bit here on this live show. But there was a couple players we got to make sure we talk about. Defensive line transfer from Louisville. Caleb Banks is about 6'6", 255 pounds. He's going to start on the defensive line at Florida. A lot of great intel from the good folks at Gators Online, so get a membership there. They're going to keep you in the know for all things Florida. But they singled out Caleb Banks as having one of the best fall camps on the defensive side of the football. And to have a guy like that, to have that kind of presence in the interior of your defensive line, or be able to line him up on your defensive line, period, wherever he lines up at, the encouraging thing is just the overall buzz around the defensive line, Caleb Banks included, is just so much better than it was a year ago. Because the feeling was, hey, those ones, they're solid. We can win with those guys. The reality, though, in the length of a Division I college football game, especially in the SEC, your ones are not going to be available for you for all 4 quarters, for every single snap. Like, you got to have rotation, especially at the defensive line. So Caleb Banks, to be transferred in and to add to that depth and to be a starter for them and to be a one, but to ultimately just kind of shore up where they are right now, very, very good sign. Trahaja Mitchell, another transfer linebacker that was singled out by Gators Online as one of the top performers from fall camp, just entered into this operation at Florida with Billy Napier going into the second year. And you feel like this is a team that, I don't want to say needs direction, maybe structure is the right word, but bottom line, you got to have somebody step up. And with Anthony Richardson leaving and with other, leaders leaving that room, like, you got to be able to step up and say, no, this is how we're going to do things. This is the way to do things. This is the right way. This is the way the coaching staff wants. We're going to go as we go. So to have Trahaja Mitchell, a guy who transferred in, provide that, it's a really good sign. He's going to start at them for middle linebacker, and you really love the fact that you have a transfer hitting the ground running, doing things the right way, meshing right away, and being able to take other guys with them. Unfortunate news out of the Gator camp. Cam Carroll, the running back, he's going to be done for the year with a knee injury. So now where do you look after that? You look to Jacoby Jackson, who's a transfer from the JUCO level, and you also look to Trayon Webb, who's going to be a true freshman. Now, that's probably going to be a more of a situational move for Florida in terms of how they utilize those guys. I think they'll have an expanded role with Cam Carroll not being in the rotation now, but you feel really good about where you stand in that running back room with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. Those are your bell cows. You're going to go as they go. Those are your guys you're handing and feeding the football to. So keep an eye on that running back room. Tough loss to lose Cam Carroll, but still I think that's going to be a position of strength for them going forward in that running back room. All right, so that finishes fall camp intel for us here. We only do fall camp intel as long as they're doing fall camp. And for the majority of these teams, they're wrapping up. And with fall camp finishing up, you know what that means? It means we got college football to watch and talk about and digest and just, it's our time right now. It's our time. There's been a lot of talk about the transfer portal and recruiting, and those are things that we talk about consistently on this show as well. But when they start playing actual games, that's what we love, man. Fall Saturdays, that's what it's all about. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.